Two men climbing toward the summit of Everest. Nobody ever sees them alive again. And 75 years later, when we finally find the body of one of them, there is one single thing missing from it. The one thing that would prove they stood on top of the world. Before Hillary, before Tenzing, before everyone. And that thing has never been found. My name is Ultramare, and welcome to the channel. Today we are talking about one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in the history of exploration. A story that has everything: ambition, friendship, mystery, and a mountain that never forgives mistakes. The story of two men who may have changed history, with nobody left alive to confirm it. To understand what happened on that icy ridge in 1924, we need to go back a little. Who was George Mallory, and why was he so obsessed with Everest that he attempted it 3 separate times? George Mallory was not an ordinary climber. He was almost a legend while still alive. Tall, athletic, with a face that journalists described as belonging to a Greek god. An educated intellectual, a teacher, a man who quoted poetry while climbing through ice. But above everything else, he was obsessed. When journalists once asked him why he wanted to conquer Everest, he gave an answer that went down in history. Because it is there. 3 words, no further explanation needed. And those 3 words perfectly describe Mallory, a man who never looked for reasons, only for directions. Upward. By 1924, he had already tried twice and turned back twice. But this third attempt felt different. Mallory knew he had to succeed. He was 37 years old, he had a family waiting at home, and deep down, he understood that this was not just another chance. It was probably his last real one. For his partner, he chose Andrew Irvine, young, only 22 years old, an Oxford student. He had nowhere near Mallory's experience at extreme altitude, but he was physically extraordinary, and, perhaps most importantly, he knew how to operate the oxygen equipment, and oxygen was the ticket to the summit. On the 8th of June, 1924, Mallory and Irvine set out from the highest camp. The weather was good. The team below watched them through binoculars. And then one member of the expedition, Noel Odell, caught the last glimpse of them anyone would ever have. He wrote that through a brief break in the clouds, he spotted 2 small, dark figures moving toward the summit, moving fast, moving with purpose. And then the clouds closed again. After that, nothing. They never returned to the high camp. They never returned to base camp. The mountain kept them. The team waited. They sent signals. They stared into the fog. But George Mallory and Andrew Irvine were never seen alive again. And then comes the question that the climbing world has never stopped asking. Where exactly were they when Odell spotted them? Were they still on the way up, or already on the way down? Did they reach the summit and die during the descent? Or did they turn back before the top and still lose their lives? The difference between those 2 possibilities is not just a historical detail. If they made it to the top, the entire history of mountaineering gets rewritten. Hillary and Tenzing, 1953, the first on Everest, become the second. For decades, Mallory was simply gone, a legend, a ghost of Everest. And then in 1999, an American expedition, organized specifically to solve the mystery, found something on the north face. At around 8,160 meters, a body, perfectly preserved by frost and altitude, white skin, distinctive clothing from the 1920s, and on that clothing, a name: George Mallory. The researchers examined everything carefully. Mallory had a broken leg, a head injury, and a rope cut by a sudden jolt, suggesting a fall. Maybe he fell. Maybe he was trying to stop Irvine from falling. Maybe both. But the most important thing they found was actually the most important thing they did not find. Mallory had been carrying a photograph of his wife, Ruth. He told friends before leaving that he would place it on the summit if he made it. The photograph was not on the body. Is that proof he reached the top? Or was it simply lost in the fall? Nobody knows. And that brings us to the one object that could end this debate forever: a Kodak camera. Mallory and Irvin were carrying a small camera on that final push. If they reached the summit, they took photographs. The film could theoretically still be developed today. The technology exists, but the camera has never been found. Irvin's body has never been found. And so, here we stand, almost 100 years later, with one frozen body, one missing camera, and a question that may never be answered. Edmund Hillary, when asked what he thought, responded with great dignity: "It is not enough to reach the summit. You have to come back." And maybe that is the whole story. Mallory may have been the first man to stand on the roof of the world, but Everest never let him come home to tell anyone. Irvin's body is still up there somewhere on that north face, at an altitude where time itself seems to stop. And maybe, just maybe, somewhere beside him lies a small Kodak camera with a roll of film that would change history forever. Until that day, Hillary and Tenzing remain the official first. But the question stays open, and the mountain keeps its secret, as it always keeps everything we give it.